This is JavaScript Basics. In this video, we're going to look at functions, how to write functions, declare functions, etc. Very basic functions. So let's get started. Now, first, what I've got here on the screen is essentially how you create a function. It's kind of similar to a cross between, I would say, a variable and an if statement, really. So you use the keyword. So when we're referring to a keyword, if you were declaring a variable, it'll be var or let or const. When you're doing a function, it's function. So that's what they're referring to when you use the word keyword. So you declare a function using the word function, just the same way you would declare a variable using var, const, or let. Then after that, you put the identifier. So that's the name that you want to give this function. Same thing as a variable. You might give the variable a name. You give a variable a name, and with a function, you also give it a name. That's called the identifier. So after that, you put parentheses and curly braces. So you give it an area to put parameters, run parameters through if you wish, which is the parentheses. And then you've got the curly braces where you'll give the commands and tell the function what to do, basically. So that's how to declare a function in what's called a function declaration. So it's the keyword identifier, parentheses, and curly braces. Okay, so let's move on, and we'll go to our first function down here. So we're going to function declaration. So this is called a function declaration. There's different ways to write functions. This is called a function declaration. So as you can see, I've created a function here. I've got the keyword, so I've written function. I've called this one memo, M-E-M-O. That's the name. It's the identifier is called memo. Then we've got the parentheses. I don't have any perimeters in the parentheses. I'm just running this with no perimeters. And then I've got the curly braces, and inside these curly braces, I have told this function to console log the string wife's birthday. So that's what this that's what this function will do. This function will console log wife's birthday. Now, to use a function, you call a function. And the way you call a function is you type the name, so the identifier, and the parentheses, and then you run that. So let's try that. So in this case, it will be memo, parentheses. So that's calling the function. So now if I run that, okay, so there's a couple of little functions going on. I might just close one of those, sorry. Okay, so if you look at the console, it says wife's birthday. That's this function running here, and we've called it here. You can call it multiple times. So if I copy that and paste it, and I run that, it says it logs and runs this function as many times as you want, as many times as you call it. So that's how you call a function. If you're using a perimeter, you would call it with whatever you want the perimeter to be, and you enter the perimeter inside the parentheses. So that's how to write and call a very basic function. Okay, so next we're going to look at the same function with a perimeter, using a perimeter. So we're going to perimeters here. So we've got function, which is the word declaring the function. Then we got, which is the keyword that declares the function. Then we've got this identifier is happy B-Day. So I've got happy B-Day as the identifier. So that's the name of this function. I've got parentheses and curly braces. So as we know, we declare a function, give it a name, put parentheses and curly braces. Inside of the parentheses, I've got name as the perimeter. So I'm running a perimeter here, and I've given it the name. And inside the curly braces, I'm asking this function to console log the string happy birthday with a space, as you can see, plus name, the parameter name. Now, when I call this function, let me just get rid of the calling of this function. When I call this function, which I've already typed here, I call it by typing the name of the function, which is happy B-Day, parentheses, and I'm going to put Camille in here, the string Camille. So when I run this in the console log, it says happy birthday, Camille. So it says happy birthday, the string happy birthday, plus the perimeter, which when I called that function, I decided to enter Camille as the perimeter. So that's how that works there. Okay, so let's get rid of that one. So next we're going to look at how you can actually assign perimeters. I'm just going to run this to get rid of the clear the console. Okay, so this is called assigning perimeters. So as you can see, we've got a function here. It's called by gifts. By gifts. We've got item 1 as the first perimeter, item 2, and item 3. What I'm asking this function to do is to console log by, and then I've put the items in each console log. I'm using the template literal here. So I'm using backticks so that the way I can insert each item is using the $sign and curly braces, and then I can put the item. So I can just write it however I want it, and that will allow me, because it's inside backticks, it will allow me to assert each item or each perimeter, sorry, using a $sign and backticks. Now, if I console log this, down here I've got, I'm sorry, if I call this function, I can make my own perimeters down here. I can change the perimeters inside as we did previously. So if I run this, it will say buy toy. Let's change it to buy toys. Buy toys, buy makeup, buy shoes. Because when I've called the function, I've told the function what I want each item to be. However, so let's see what happens when I remove this and don't call any. I'm not going to give the item any, assign it to anything. So we'll run that. Now it says by undefined, by undefined, by undefined, because we haven't defined these items. But you can assign them as well if you want to. So let's just say you already know what you want it to be. So you could call this one toys. This is inside the parentheses of the function, by the way. So we've declared the function. We're calling the function by gifts. We're creating parameters, and we're actually assigning each parameter what we want it to be ahead of time. So we're going to do this one, makeup. And then we're going to assign the final item to shoes. Now, when I call the function now, I'm not going to put anything in the parentheses. I'm just going to call it, and these items have now been assigned in the function itself. So when I call the function, it's essentially knows what these items are, and it's printing them all to there. So you can assign perimeters if you need to ahead of time, if you want to ahead of time. If you want them to be a specific value ahead of time, you can already assign them. So that's how to do that. Next, we're going to talk about, let's get rid of that. Returning. So in a function, let's see what happens if we get rid of the return. So if I declare a function, I'm going to call this one count. I'm going to give it two parameters. One's called isle and one's called length. In the function body, I'm asking it to multiply isle by length. So let's call this function. Sorry, we're going to console log as well, because there's no console log in this function that we're using. So to see what this function is doing, we do have to console log it as well. So I'm console logging this function. So we'll run that. Undefined. So it's undefined because, hang on, let's give it some values too. Sorry, while we're here. 4. So I'm going to do undefined. Okay, so I'm calling this function. I'm giving the perimeter's value. I've told it to multiply these two numbers together, but it's undefined. Because the thing that I'm missing is inside this function is I'm not telling it to return those values. You actually need to return those values so that the function has an output. So now when I run it, it's 20. It's taken these numbers and it's multiplied it. When I originally ran it, I did run it with these numbers. However, because I didn't ask it to return this, I didn't ask it to return 4 times 5. It was undefined. I have to use the word return inside the body for it to return information so I can use it. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that when you create functions, if it's not doing what you want it to do, if it's not giving the results you want it to give, it could potentially be that you haven't returned what's in the body there. Okay. Next we go to helper functions. So we're actually referring to the function above, with the one called count. So we can use this inside another function as a helper function. So below here we've got a function called cost. We're running the perimeters aisle and length, and inside the body we're returning this function with these values, same values, and multiplying that by 2, if that makes sense. So I'm going to make a variable underneath this. It's const full cost equals cost this bit, which is this function, with the values 5 and 4. And then I'm going to console log this variable called full cost. So let's run that. Now we've got 40. As you can see in the console log, we've got 40. So what's happening? We're declaring a function called cost. We've got aisle and length as the perimeters. Inside the body, we're returning the previous function called count, which returns aisle times length. So we've put count, aisle, and length. So we're returning this function. We're actually returning this function that's up here, the previous function. So in this function, we're returning the previous function that we created, and we're multiplying that by 2. So this function produced 20. We're returning this function, and we're also multiplying it by 2. Down here, I've decided to make a variable called full cost. I've assigned this variable to this function called cost, and I'm running 5 and 4 as the values. I'm console logging this variable called full cost. This variable is calling all this. It's using this function here, which is used in this function here, which is used in this variable here. So when I console log full cost, it's using all this information here. It's running through this whole process. So I'm going to run that through again because repetition is very important. I've called a function, count. I'm running 2 perimeters, aisle and length. I'm asking that function to return aisle times length. Remember, you need to put return as well, otherwise it won't return that information. You'll get nothing, it'll be undefined. So I'm asking the count function to return aisle times length. Now, I'm going to use that function inside another function. So I'm calling another function called cost with the same perimeters, aisle and length. I'm asking this function to return the count function with aisle and length and times that by 2. So it's still not going to return, and we're returning that. It's still not going to return any value because aisle and length don't have any value yet. So it doesn't matter that it returns aisle and length times 2 because we don't have any values yet. But essentially this cost function here is going to return aisle times length times 2. So you could console log the cost one if you want to and run it with values, but I'm going to get even more complicated. And I'm going to declare a new variable called const full cost. I'm assigning this variable with this function and running the value 5 and 4, which means it's going to go right up here to the count one. It's going to do 5 times 4. That's going to come into this cost function and multiply that by 2. So, and then that's going to come down into here. The full cost is going to equal this function here. So I'm going to console log full cost function. Full cost variable, which will give the value up here. Now, just to make it a little bit less complicated, let's remove this. Let's remove this variable here. And let's just let's simply go cost and run it with the value 6 and 2. We'll run that, and we've got 24 now. We've got 24 because I've changed the values. I've got 6 and 2 as the arguments. So it's a little bit simpler here. We'll look at it again one more time. Function count takes in aisle and length. This function returns aisle times length. So the count function returns aisle times length. I'm going to use that as a helper function inside this function. So I'm declaring a new function, which is cost, which takes in aisle and length, and it returns the count function with aisle and length, which multiplies aisle and length. So this will return aisle times length times 2. Now I'm console logging this cost function. I'm running 6 and 2 as the value, so aisle will become 6, length will become 2, so it'll be 6 times 2 times 2, and then it prints it up to the console, which is 24. I like to repeat things like a broken record, go over things over and over again. That's the best way to learn. Next, we move on to function as an expression. This is a different way to write a function. So when you write a function expression, you declare it as a variable first. So const bday, const bday. That's what we're going to call this function expression here. And then you assign it to function, and in the brackets you can put a variable. We've got day, and then inside the curly braces we're going to run what we want this function to do. So if day equals Wednesday, we return true, else return false, which means that this person's b-day is on Wednesday, and this function will tell you whether it's true or false. So I'm going to call this function. So to call, as we said, we write the name of the function, which is bday, and I'm going to call it with their birthday's on a Wednesday. I'm going to put Wednesday. So now I'm calling this function. I'm just going to go up and again and mute this function. Okay, so let's run this function. Oh, sorry, console log. I don't have a console log. I need to console log it. So if a function has a console log, that means you're asking that function to console log. These functions I'm using here, I haven't asked this function to console log, so I need to console log it if I want to see what the function's doing. Okay, so we've got, we're calling this function here with Wednesday. Let's spell it correctly. It's got false because I didn't spell it correctly. Okay, so I've called this function, so I've called it using bday in parentheses, and inside the parentheses I've written the argument Wednesday. So this function, which is declared as a variable, is a function expression. It takes in Wednesday and it runs it through a conditional statement. So if the day equals Wednesday, return true, else return false. So I've called this function with Wednesday and it's returned true. So again, the way you write a function expression is you declare a variable, so const bday, that's what I'm going to call this variable. You assign that to the function by writing function. You have parentheses and curly braces because it's a function. Again, like an if statement, you have parentheses and curly braces because it's a function. Inside the parentheses, you'll run a perimeter if you want a perimeter. And then inside the curly braces, you'll tell the function what to do. So that's how to write a function as an expression, a function expression. Next, we're going to move on to arrow, what's called arrow function. This is essentially a function expression, but it's a shorter way of writing a function expression. I actually have the same function here, but I've called it birthday because if I call it bday, it will interfere with the one above. So I've called this one const birthday, but it's the same function. Const birthday equals function parentheses with day inside of the parentheses. Curly braces, we're asking it if day equals Wednesday, return true, else return false. Now, all we're going to do here is show you how to write it as an arrow function, which is a shorter way of writing this same function. So we're going to turn this function expression into an arrow function using an arrow function. The way you do that is you can remove the word function. So you don't need to type out the word function. You can remove that. You can also remove the parentheses if you wish. If it's got 0 parameters, you need the parentheses with nothing in between it. If you've got more than one perimeter, you need to use the parentheses. Let's not worry about that for now. Let's just learn how to write an arrow function using what's called a fat arrow. Now a fat arrow, I'll type one up, is equals and then greater than sign. That's called a fat arrow. It's equals and then a greater than sign. So what we do is we replace function with a fat arrow, but we also put the fat arrow on the opposite side of the parentheses. So remove function. On the opposite side of the parentheses, we do equals greater than. That is now a arrow function expression expressed in a function as an expression. So it's written shorter. You've gotten rid of the word function. So you declare it constant birthday equals parentheses and then the fat arrow. And then after the fat arrow, you have the curly braces with whatever you want that function to do. So that's how to use an arrow function. So it's the same as this one here, the function expression. Let's turn this one into a function, into an arrow function. So const b day equals function parentheses day, and then the curly braces with all the information inside it. We get rid of function, delete that. On the opposite side of the parentheses, we put equals, and then put the greater than sign. Let's run this as well to check it, that it still works. So we'll run that. And we've got true. It still works because this is a function as an expression, but we've changed it to the arrow, to an arrow function. It's a shorter way of writing a function expression. Again, if it is a bit, when doing this first time, you probably want to watch this and listen to this over and over again. Next, we're going to concise body, something called concise body, which is again trimming it down. So you can trim it down even more. And if the function has only one line, you can trim it right down to what's called concise body. So we have here another function, const special day equals, we've got the perimeter. We've turned this into this is a function expression, which we've turned into the fat arrow using the arrow expression. We've got the curly braces, and then we want this function to return day equals Wednesday, and then true or false. So to do this, we get rid of return, and we just have day. We have the argument, so day. This is also a ternary, written as a ternary expression, and we get rid of those curly braces at the end there. So look at this. We've written this same function in a very short way. We can call this function, so let's do it. Console log special day. And we will use the day, we'll run Wednesday. As the argument. Well, let's put it in quote marks, of course. And spell it correctly this time. That'd be nice. Okay, so let's run this. And we've got true. So we blocked out the one above, so that's not interfering. Now this one's producing true. This function here is producing true. And look how, let's get rid of that out of the way. Look how small this function is. It's const special day equals parentheses with day inside the parentheses. We've got the fat arrow. We've got day. So this is the condition. Day equals Wednesday. This bit here is the condition. Day equals Wednesday is the condition. Then we've got question mark to tell it that that's the condition. And then we're giving it the option of true, colon, false, true or false. So we've written this whole function here, this function expression right here. We've gone from const birthday equals parentheses day, fat arrow. No, even worse actually, we originally had function. But anyway, const bday equals parentheses day, fat arrow, curly braces. If parentheses day equals Wednesday, curly braces return true, else curly braces return false. We've turned that into const special day equals parentheses day, fat arrow day equals Wednesday, question mark true, colon false. So that's called concise body. That's how you write a function in the shortest way possible. So it's const special day equals parentheses with day inside the parentheses equals the condition, which is day equals Wednesday, question mark, true, colon false. So either true or false. It can be a bit confusing, and probably the way I've explained it isn't the clearest way possible. I wanted to get to just the basics of it for now. We can go into more details later. We can come up with other ways of remembering it later. But just for now, that's how to remember how to write functions in JavaScript. So thank you.